Hello everyone, it's Helen from Journaling Planet. Would you like to make some tabs and use up some scraps and literally use paper from any book page, scrap paper, magazine paper, anything at all that you want? Well, I'm going to show you how using just one tool, and that is the circle punch. I'm going to show you some different shapes that you can create and what they look like when you attach them to a piece of card. Don't be fooled by the card that I've attached it to. This is just a piece of cut masterboard. This is not a finished piece of card. It is just for demonstration. When you get your embellishments on there, it'll really set it off. So let's take a look at some techniques using just a master punch. Now, obviously, you can buy a tab punch. Okay, and I have looked at them a couple of times because I am very big on punches. Yeah, I really love them, but I just think, you know, storage space is always at a premium. In a way, why buy two things if you can just use one? So the first technique I'm going to show you with this is you cut your circle. And by the way, I've no idea if I'm sure other people have done this, but I've only just thought of it. So I haven't seen it anywhere. I'm just showing you what sort of has come about as I've been thinking about this. So I'm going to fold it in half, just lightly, the circle. And then I'm going to push it back through the circle punch, and I'm going to push it through till I have a sort of eye shape. Do you know what I mean by that? Kind of like almost like a petal shape, but an eye, like, you know, if you were drawing somebody's eye, you'd sort of make that shape. Okay, and then when you punch it out, you get those kind of shapes, and then you're left with this. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half the other way. Sometimes, depending on how the punch goes, you have a little bit of overlap. Now, it's up to you how much you care about that. You could glue it down, and because it's either side of a piece of card, you wouldn't notice. But if it bothers you, you can just turn it this way, get your scissors, and cut the excess if it really bothers you. I have to say it doesn't particularly bother me, but sometimes it works and there's no excess to cut. Other times it's just where you place it in the cutter. You'll have to just trim off the excess, and you can decide which side you want to use as your tab. You might want the little chicken. That's quite cute as a tab. And then as soon as you have that in place, you just glue it either side of your card, whatever your card may be. It could be a tag, it could be a journaling spot, and you just glue it into place. For demonstration purposes, I'll quickly do this one. You might want to ink around. That is a judgment call. I think with this particular paper, I'm not going to ink around, but it just gives you the gist. So that's the first technique, but there are actually a few different shapes that you can create so that you don't actually need a scrap piece of paper that big, you know, big enough to create your circle. You can use smaller pieces, or shall I say you can use different shapes. That's it. That's your tab. Done, dusted. And I didn't need to buy another cutter to do it. Okay, so that's one idea. Another thing that has come to my attention, just get that scrap out of the way, is that if you have longer pieces of paper, so this is just a ticket, if you have longer pieces of paper rather than, you know, one big enough to do a circle, you can still create an interesting tab. So you punch it and you'll have some excess drop off. And then you've got like rounded pieces on each side. Can you see that? On each end. And then you just fold it in half as you did the other, and then you have a slightly different shaped tab, which again you could just go to a piece of masterboard, glue it down, and you've got your tab. So that's another example. And what else? Oh yes, so you can also create shapes that are kind of inverted, like this one, where it sort of goes the opposite direction to make a tab. I'll show you on this piece of paper. I'm going to just cut it to a length that I think would make a good tab. And then I'm going to fold it in half. There's a lot of folding in half in this in this kind of technique. Push it through, and then just to the very edge, and then I'm going to just clamp down, and I've got a little tab, almost like a little ribbon tab, and that can just be glued either side. It becomes another little tab. So I've made quite a few of these and I will be putting them in a little box to use whenever I want a tab. But I hear you saying, Helen, what if, you know, these are the only kind of scraps I have, white paper. What am I supposed to do then? That's not very interesting. That's going to make an interesting tab. Okay, don't worry. We do have some other media at our disposal. What if I covered it with some washi tape, that piece of paper? So I used the paper as the base, but then I just put some washi tape over it. Don't mind if it overhangs, it's fine. Just cover it as best you can with the washi tape. Tear it at the end. That's it. Okay, so I've created something a bit interesting there. It's a useful base, that white paper, but it wasn't that interesting to look at. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut there and make one tab like that I can then fold over. Like so. So that's much more interesting, isn't it? And then with this other piece here, since I've already got this kind of shape at one end, I'm going to just emphasize that a little bit. I'm going to fold it in half as best I can. And then just put it through the ends through there. And I've got a nice little tab that goes the other way. And that's just with some washi tape. And you can use any kind of washi tape for that. I'm just looking for another piece. So yeah, so this other white piece here, maybe you're thinking that's not looking so interesting. So you just get some, it could be any kind of washi tape. It could just be one colour. That would make it more interesting. Don't mind me, I'm just going to spend about 10 years looking for the end of this washi tape, you know, just for your entertainment. I'm just going to put that there, and I don't mind, leave the jagged edge, leave it as texture. It's interesting. You put that over there like that, and then off we go. We're going to get a tab with rounded edges. That's our first tab. Very nice. Fold it in half. Job's a good one. I like the texture. I like the rip texture, so I'm not going to do anything about that. You can trim it neatly if you like, if you don't like it. And again, since I've got, you know, at the other end, I've got this kind of inverted shape going on. I'm going to just emphasize that, push it through, and that's another different kind of tab. And then actually I think I can get another one out of this, just a little one. I'm going to just, because it's small, I'm going to just fold it in half. I'm going to go the other way with it and just do the inverted shape again. So that's another tiny little one. Okay, so just another tiny little one there. Slight technical malfunction there when my phone ran out of memory. So I was just about to suggest that you could use very thin pieces to do this. It doesn't really matter how thin they are, it's more important how long they are. So that, for example, is quite a thin piece. It still creates quite a nice shape, but obviously the curve is not as pronounced because it's a thinner piece of paper, but it still works, still looks quite nice as a little tab and would look good glued down. I'm just going to show you the main technique that I started with a few more times just so that it's really clear. Just pushing that through there. You're obviously left with a sort of interesting scrap here that you could use as a stencil or for some other project. And then we would fold this in half and we would push it through here. And we would get it as straight as we could, get that sort of eye shape. And then fold it in half. We've got our tab. I was really pleased when I noticed this, and I'm sure other people have noticed it before, but the main reason that I was so pleased is that I just thought I can use up so many scraps with this method. And it's going to essentially be a way of whittling down the scraps when I need to. And to be honest, I always need to. So I just think this is going to be very useful technique for me. I hope it is for you. Oh, that didn't like that, did it? Sometimes I guess the trimmer is not going to like it and we need to come in with our scissors. But you know, we all have these moments with things that we're trying where they don't quite work for whatever reason. And even that I think is kind of funky as a tab. So I just think when you actually have smaller pieces of paper, somehow they look more interesting, even though they're just scraps, like same old scraps. Let's try a little bit of text, because that's always interesting. So let's do that. And then fold it in half. Lovely little tab. As you can see, I'm building up quite a pile of these. Oh, here's one of the not so interesting ones again. Maybe we'll get a bit of washi tape on that. And start using the punch to make some interesting shapes, tab shapes, with some not very interesting pieces of paper. There'll be lots of ways of doing this, and obviously you should play around, you know, enjoy yourself with it and have a bit of a play. I think I'm just scratching the surface of some of the things that I'm going to do with this. But if you have any interesting tips around using this technique, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. So I'll just glue a few of these to some masterboards so that you get a sense of how they look. Obviously I showed you a few in the beginning. Kind of interesting and quirky. We like interesting and quirky. Okay, so let's see which one would best fit this. Maybe I kind of like this for it because it's got a bit of green in that kind of, you know, is sympathetic with that foil, which is from a stock cube, an OXO stock cube. I just decided to collage some foil onto my masterboard. I will collage anything onto my masterboard. I'm unstoppable when it comes to stuff like that. I like to have a real mix of materials and just create slightly different looks than what you normally see. Instant tab, just right there. Sort of really loving how that looks. And remember that these are not finished embellishments, they're just a bit of masterboard. So there would be scope to add embellishments, further embellishments to these, and, you know, really decide which one you wanted. I think this one, I'm going to go for some book page, I think, like some text, lovely. And I'm going to ink around the edges of that just to make it stand out a bit more. I do always like to find another use for things I've already got in my stash, particularly if it's a tool that I can use over and over again. So if you have any other use for circle punches, please do put them in the comments, because I'm always just so interested to hear about other ways you can use tools. And this one has really rocked my world in terms of getting rid of some scraps. And I think what's going to happen is that I'm just going to continue for quite some time after I turn the video off and get through some scraps, do some real scrap busting. I just think that looks really great. I didn't need to use a special tab punch to create that effect. You can also go for really strange combinations because you're using these scraps. You can go for unusual pairings that you wouldn't normally put together. It can open up new ideas in your colour scheme and your colour palette that you perhaps hadn't originally thought of. Don't think there's any need to ink something that's that colour. I think it just pops. And I love how that pops on there. Really, really interesting. And I've got one of these little bits of masterboard. We'll use one of the tiny little strips. Tiny little tab strips that I cut, where you can barely even see the roundness of it. But I think that tiny little flower one is gonna, we'll probably put it there, just at the side, so it's more of a tab, or maybe down here. Actually, I think it's a little bit long. I think I might have to come in and just, you don't want your tabs to be too long, you see. It makes them look more like the tops of a tag than a tab. So yeah, so I've just shortened that down a bit, and I'm going to put it, I am going to still put it in the middle, but it looks slightly more like a tab than a tag topper. But you can use these any way you want. You could use them as a tag topper. I've got a video about how to 10 ways to top a tag. This is not one of them, but it's sort of similar to what I do with some paper in that. So I just think that looks really cute as well. And it's quite a long one, but that's okay. It just looks really nice. I think it just works. So yes, I'm going to continue off camera now and just create some more tabs and fill a whole box full and hopefully get through quite a few of my scraps. I hope this has been an interesting video in terms of thinking about how you could use your circle punch, how you could use washi tape on those slightly more boring scraps to make tabs, and how essentially any piece of paper is fair game if you've got the right tools to make it into something interesting. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.